She says, I was one of the Russian girls who came, and I came to your school. I was 16 years old. I did not want to be there. Capitalized every single word. And I was so angry, and I think I did everything wrong to be expelled. And you wouldn't expel me. Then one day, I said, I have to talk to you. I came into the office, and he said to the secretary, do not disturb me. I have a very important meeting. And all of a sudden, I realized it. I am so important. I am such an important meeting that you are telling everyone, do not disturb? Wow, what's going on here? She says, I never became an angel, but I definitely stayed in school.
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today, we have Mrs. Sheindel Teichtel. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Mrs. Teichtel was a principal for 47 years, I believe. Am I correct?
Actually, over 50, but that's fine.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. She was a seasoned principal of the Beis Rivka School for many, many years, and she has an incredible story to share with us. And so I thought it would be really interesting to hear from her about her ideas in chinuch, what it was like then to assume the role of such a school as a young working mother. And she also has an incredible story about the loss of her own child, and we're going to hear about that as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Mrs. Teichtel.
It's always a pleasure to speak to somebody like you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, first of all, tell us what it was like becoming principal. I mean, at what age did you become principal of the school of Beis Rivka?
I was in my 20s.
Wow.
I have to backtrack and explain that I had the
Sure.
privilege of growing up next to 760 Eastern Parkway, and the Rebbe was very much part of our lives. And
Mhm.
quite frankly, I never had any intention of being a teacher, and definitely not a principal. And through that matter of Hashgacha Pratis and the Rebbe's guidance and direction, at the age of 17, rather than being a journalist, I had a byline in the New York Times. I was going to be a muckraker and save the world and make a difference. The Rebbe's guidance and direction, which is a story for another time, I ended up teaching, and I
Wow.
fell in love with teaching.
Well, what made you go into teaching? What did the
Well,
Rebbe tell
at that time, at that time I had just graduated high school, and I had planned to go to university to become a journalist. And the Rebbe advised me differently, and he suggested I go into the teaching field, which I did not do very happily, quite frankly. But once I came into the classroom and I realized the joy of being a teacher and the impact it can have on a child, not in a very theoretical way, but in a real way, I
Mhm.
realized it's something I truly love. So instead of
Wow.
changing the world and becoming a muckraker, I was going to be like Theodore Dreiser and write books about what's wrong in all the factories. And I was going to bring peace and love to everyone. Instead of that, I worked with children. First, I taught second grade, then first grade, then sixth grade, then ultimately English and history in high school, then Chumash in high school, and then I became a principal. But I still continue teaching because that's really my
So
first love.
So
And
I just want to,
yeah,
sorry, I just want to interrupt you for a sec. I'm just curious, why were you thinking to become a journalist and
I
conquer the
grew up.
world?
I grew up in the '60s, and at that time we were very into philosophy. We were very into. We didn't really have an opportunity to learn Chassidus in depth. We were intellectually very hungry. We were
Mm,
looking for ideas. So my friends and I read different books about different philosophies and the concept of tikkun olam and saving the world and being a person that can transfer darkness into light. We ended up doing it, but in a much better way. And so the
right.
idea was to be a journalist. And I
Mm,
loved to read, and I used to read all those books about how people are being exploited and how people are being used by Steinbeck and Dreiser and all those people. So I was going to be the one to bring light to the impoverished, to bring them a good sense of life, and to make them feel a future and a hope. At the
mm,
end, I did that one student at a time. Hopefully, that's what I try
right.
happened.
Absolutely.
Right,
What
and
what
you
did
have.
you what
I'm sorry. I
what
just
did
want
your
to add. You
parents
have.
think that?
My parents came from Russia, and my father comes, and my mother came from very Hasidic backgrounds. I think my father's great grandfather was a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe. My mother's father was a man of Mesiris Nefesh, who lost his life when Stalin
Self-sacrifice.
when Stalin murdered a number of Chassidim in 1938. So I grew up
Mm,
with a very strong sense of Mesiras Nefesh, which really means thinking beyond yourself, making a
mhm,
difference in this world. So I was
mhm,
going to do it in one way. And then the
mhm,
Rebbe, through his infinite understanding of my personality and my love for doing things and being active and making change, changed it to the concept of teaching. I just
mhm.
want to share, for example, the Rebbe's outlook and the Rebbe's understanding of a teenager. When I was 13 years old, Bishivka
Right.
High School opened, and
Mhm,
my sister had gone to Beis Yaakov High School, which was another very good Jewish school. And when the school opened, I did not want to go to a new school. Me, try something new. I mean, I want to go to some place which I knew was successful and the children had a good structure and there were teachers. To go to this new place, come on. I mean,
mhm,
who knows what it's going to be like? So my father said, you have to go to Chabad school. So I told my father, but I don't want to go there. He said, you know what? Write the Rebbe. You have to
mhm,
understand that at that time, the Rebbe was like our grandfather. If I'm
mhm,
not talking about the Rebbe now as Rosh B'nai Yisrael, as someone, of course, with all the spirituality and the concern for the entire Jewish nation, not just Jewish nation, but the world. But for
mhm,
us, the generation that came here after World War II, we arrived in the United States in 1953. I was a little girl, and we moved to Crown Heights in 1957. So the Rebbe was the
mhm,
person we turned to for every little detail. As children, we
mhm,
went in for yechidus, private audiences with the Rebbe. The Rebbe guided us. The Rebbe smiled at us. The Rebbe laughed with us. So it was a very integral part of our lives, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So therefore, when the question came up that I didn't want to go to Chabad school, my father said, no problem, just ask the Rebbe. So that's what
mhm,
I did. I wrote the Rebbe that a new school starting, I don't want to go there. And I used the English terminology of guinea pig, although I
mhm,
wrote the letter in Yiddish. And I wrote the Rebbe, I don't want to be a guinea pig. And the Rebbe responded almost immediately. He crossed out the word guinea pig and he wrote chalutza. Chalutza is a pioneer. Now, the
mhm,
Rebbe understood me, understood that I needed something beyond the box. He knew that I wanted to climb the mountains and ford the rivers and make a change in this world.
mhm.
So when he used the key word of chalutza, a pioneer, I was all ready. In my imagination, I saw myself in Israel, getting up 5 in the morning and cutting the wheat and just changing the world and, taking the apples off the trees. I was going to be a chalutza. And so I ended up in Beis Rivka, and actually I never left. That's really
Wow.
where I spent, except for 1 year of teaching in a different school to prove myself to myself that I can do something else. I actually ended up teaching in Beis Rivka my whole life. And
Is
so
that your personality? Like, very much a chalutza? Very much, I mean, it
um,
sounds from what
I
you're
look,
saying, like a journalist, a
to be an
pioneer.
educator, to be an
Mhm,
educator, you have to think out of the box because
mhm,
people don't belong in boxes. So to be an educator, to be someone who loves chinuch and feels strongly that every child has potential to grow, in whatever area it may be, you have to look out of the box. Because you know the story, I think Sheindel Teichtel always tells it, of a teacher who was given a class of very weak students. And he got a number next to each child's name. And so he thought that was their IQ numbers. They're very high, 200 or whatever,
mhm,
really high. And so, wow, so I have such a bright class. So he worked them hard and he had expectations and he had many different exercises for improving thinking skills. At the end of the year, he came to the principal and he said, look how well my children did in all the government tests. Principal said,
mhm,
you're making a mistake. He says, no, look how well they did. He said, this is impossible. I gave you a class of special education. At that time, I guess
mhm,
they used to judge people by their IQ. He says, what do you mean? They're so bright. He says, really? Why do you think so? And he took out a tattered piece of paper from his pocket and he showed and he said, why, these are their IQs. He said, no, sir. These are the locker numbers. It's what
mm,
we expect.
wow.
If we expect them to succeed, of course, we have to use appropriate tools. But honestly, if whatever our expectations are, and we give them we empower them, and we give them the belief, they can live up to it, each in their own way, of
Mm,
course. So to me,
mhm,
teaching and education and chinuch is something beyond the box. And so
mhm,
therefore, in my personality, I like always moving forward. I like change. I like growth, but change that's based on a foundation of meaning. So therefore, to me, once I started teaching, I loved it. I think I also enjoyed being an actress. In first grade, you really act out all the stories. Then I taught
Right.
English and literature, and you talk. When you teach Edgar Allan Poe, quote "The Raven Nevermore," put your whole heart and soul into it, or
Mm,
whatever Robert Frost, Walt Whitman, and then by Hashgacha Pratis, I changed to teaching Chumash, and I found Hafach Ba V'Hafach Ba. Chumash, it's like an open world. You can find everything in Chumash. In that same pasuk, if you go beyond the layers, you can see it all. When I was a child, my mother once bought me a gift. It was called a babushka. Actually, I still have one. And I was fascinated by it. What's so fascinating about babushka? It doesn't have any batteries, and it doesn't talk, and it doesn't move. It's just a wood. But you know what it is? One little doll into the other doll, into the other doll, to
mm,
the other doll, until you find a tiny, tiny one. And layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. And that's really what teaching Chumash or Chassidus is all about. You think you know it all? Another layer,
mm,
another layer, another layer. Remember, I once asked my father, how do you say Parsha? How do you study the weekly portion every week? Doesn't it get boring? I mean, my father and I know her lived till 96 years old. And all
wow.
my life, I saw him always taking, it's called Shnai Mikra Echatargum, reviewing the same weekly portion with all the commentaries. He says, every year it's a new Parsha. I say, ha
Mm,
ha. And God created the world. And God created the world the first day. He says, no, every year you find a deeper meaning and another relevancy and another point. And there's all the different aspects. It's like the babushka, the same thing as everything else in life, and
mm,
definitely in education. So therefore,
mhm,
to me, working chinuch is something I'm very passionate about. Although I don't want to use the word retired because I did not retire. I
mm,
changed my
mm.
my my interest in education. So although I'm not a teacher anymore, I'm not a principal anymore. I still teach, and I still do projects in chinuch. I teach different
Amazing.
places, individuals, etc. So this is what I really am. What am I? I'm simply a teacher and a principal. That's all.
Eh, to what do you attribute, like, your tremendous success in chinuch?
How do you assess success? What is success? Is success the story of the girl who was working in a bakery someplace out in the western part of the United States? And she did not look like a girl who went to Beis Rivka dressed accordingly. And someone started picking up some cakes, and she said, "Don't take that. It's chalav akum." He says,
Mm,
"What?" And he looked at her like this was didn't make sense. On one hand, she's saying chalav akum. On the other hand, she didn't look like she knew what chalav akum was. She says, "Why? You don't know? I went to Beis Rivka." She takes a picture of the Rebbe out of her pocket. Maybe that's success. She has a picture of the
mhm,
Rebbe. Or maybe
mhm,
success is having thousands, I'm not exaggerating, thousands of students all over the world, a shluchis. Or maybe
mhm,
success is the mother who stays home with her 6 children and nurtures them and teaches them. Or maybe when I see success, when I see all the different podcasts, you didn't go to Bishop, you grew up in Toronto, but a podcast of my students, I say, wow,
mhm,
I'm so impressed. And sometimes just a student who didn't do well academically in school, and yet she's so successful in life. So
mhm,
success can be measured in so many different ways. And in chinuch, you can't really assess success with a measuring tape. You can't do it just by tests. How many girls passed the Regents, the New York State tests? Or how did the girls do in the Gemras, which are tests we give at the end of the 4 years in high school on the different, on the Chumash and on different, on Tanya and different things. Success is step by step. It's like when you have your 1.5-year-old child or little, I don't know, depends what time the child starts walking. He takes that first step and everybody applauds. That's
mm,
success. So
mm,
what do I don't know if I had success or not, but I know that I was just a shlucha. I carried out the Rebbe's vision. My husband and I, had the privilege of actually being told that our shlichus is chinuch. We went in for Yechidus like an excited young couple, all ready to go again, not conquer the world, but change the world. My sister
mm,
was a shlucha at that time in England and London. Today, Baruch Hashem, she has been for over 40 years in Meckman, Wisconsin. Faggy Rappaport and her husband, David. And I
mhm,
wanted to go someplace interesting, exotic, different. So we wrote the Rebbe a list of places we were offered, and somewhere in Europe and somewhere in the United States. We were ready to go any place. And at the bottom, we wrote in little letters, And we also have offer of teaching in New York.
Hmm.
And the Rebbe, in his infinite wisdom and his understanding, and of course with his Ruach HaKodesh, told us to stay in Chinuch. At first, I was very disappointed. I felt I had got a slap in my face. I'm not good enough. Why can't I open a Chabad house and attract people and influence them and impact upon them and have them find the best in life, a Torah living lifestyle? Teaching? Come on, teaching with little dingy rooms?
Hmm.
And that's what we did. We taught. And I have hanging on my wall, but I can't turn the camera around, what the Rebbe told us about that first Yechidus. I'll say it first in Yiddish and I'll explain it in English. When I left my job in Beisrivka, by the dinner that they made, they gave me this as a picture. The Rebbe said to us, "Es soll megadol sein die Kinder, die Torah chuppah meisem tevim, die eigene Kinder und die Talmidim, habonim eila ha-talmidim." The Rebbe told us, gave us a blessing. We should take our children to Torah, to a life based on Torah, to chuppah, to a future, to marriage, and Maasem Tovim, not just merely intellectual pursuit of Torah, but actual actions and deeds. And then the Rebbe added, and your students are also your children.
Hmm.
So once that was our shlichus, we went on the Rebbe's shoulders. My husband taught in Yeshiva University High School, girls, 47 years.
Hmm.
And he truly affected people's lives. Till today, my children will go someplace. I have children all over the world, and they'll meet somebody. Teichtel, are you related by any chance to Rabbi Teichtel? I had just
Hmm.
recently, we just got an email from somebody. In 1982, he was my teacher. I said, yeah, that's my father. Your father? And they want to kiss my son's hand if it's, if it's my daughter's there with him or daughter-in-law, because he really impacted lives. And I did
Hmm.
my best. I tried. I think I had over 1,000 students. I also had another privilege. I taught in the school that was established by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. It was a school that was established actually, I believe, in early 1940s. I'm not sure, if something like that. It went through a history of great principals and directors. And again, we were on his shoulders. He established the school. Beisrivka was a school that is under Melkas Ninyane Chinuch. People think that Chabad is identified with Chabad houses. But if you want to go
Hmm.
back in history, the first thing that the previous Rebbe came in 1939 was he established organization. We call it Merkaz. But look at the words. Merkaz le'inyone chinuch, a center for education. And
Hmm.
then the first emissaries the Rebbe sent, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Fries Rebbe sent, was not to open a Chabad house, was to open a school. He sent Rabbi Posner to Pittsburgh, Rabbi Fogelman, I believe, to Worcester. He
Hmm.
sent Rabbi Hecht, I believe, to Chicago, and many, many more. Another Rabbi Hecht to Connecticut. The idea is you can't open Chabad houses if you don't have people to open them. And you can't
Hmm.
have people to open them unless you educate them what it means to be responsible for a fellow Jew. So chinuch, or education, is what it's all about.
Hmm.
Recently, a few years ago, maybe a fascinating book came out. I think it was written by Rabbi Thomason and Rabbi Abrams, and they take 50 Jewish Hebrew words and go into the etymology of the words. And he takes the word chinuch, and I find it so real and so fascinating. Chinuch, people usually say, has the word chen in it. Chen means charm, graciousness. But the word chen is also related to the word rachamim, which means compassion, understanding.
Hmm.
And the word rachamim is related to the word rechem, which is a womb, where
Hmm.
a fetus feels loved and nurtured, and the outside winds can't get to it. Yet at the same time, it's only a preparatory. It's not the goal. It's not the end all. So chinuch is taking that child, taking that student, could be an adult, it doesn't matter, and surrounding him with unconditional love, with care, but knowing an objective. It's not to stay in this room forever. It's a preparation for the life that the person is going to be leading. So
Hmm.
when we had the opportunity to work in chinuch, in the truest sense of the terminology, that's what it's all about. That's we never
Hmm.
get. I do projects now, of some Menachem Foundation and some independently, and it's all about one thing: enhancing chinuch, training teachers, giving them the necessary tools to help each child fulfill their potential, and And if a person does not end up being a teacher, everybody is the chinuch. A mother,
Mm,
a mother has to teach her children. You are anything you do. You are a worker. You work. You're a nurse. You're a chinuch because you're dealing with people in the vulnerable time, and you want to
for
give
sure.
them the tools. So honestly speaking, I don't almost every job. I mean, even a street sweeper. If you
Right.
sweep the street and you smile at the child walking by, you're a chinuch. So to me, it's an all encompassing. It's something which is really a life. It's not a job. It's not a career. Anybody in education. I once took a course on leadership training. And one of the things we did was visit a public school in New York City, a very good high school. And I spoke to one of the principals, and she was telling me, it is not a job, it's a mission. I said, hey, you're saying what our Rebbe says. It's a mission,
Mm.
it's a shlichus. And that's really what it's all about.
For sure. So I'm wondering, I mean, you're talking about educating a child and surrounding them with love and treating them like your own child, taking them into the womb and bringing them to chuppah, to their future, to marriage, and so forth. How did you manage to do that with hundreds, thousands of students at the same time? How would you have that
First of
personal
all,
connection?
each child is its own world. I was fortunate enough, I was blessed. That's where out all the years in high school, I had the most wonderful, dedicated, devoted staff.
Mm,
Teachers who, again, they don't look at their job as a career, they look at it as a shlichus. And so working together with individual teachers and great principals, and of course, shluchas that we had, girls that used to come, and hopefully parents as well. Each child is an individual. Like somebody said, how did you know? One day you told my daughter that you love her yellow sweater. We have uniforms, but she was wearing like a jacket number or something. She says, how did you notice it? What do you mean, how did I notice? Your daughter walks in the morning. I say, good morning. I notice. Or I don't
mm,
remember this, but this was a really weird story. I went to a wedding, it was maybe 7 years ago. A woman comes over to me. I did not recognize her. And she says, do you remember who I am? I said, not really. She says, Vaishivka went through many different dramatic situations. One was an influx of Russian students when all the Russians came. She says, I was one of the Russian girls who came, and I came to your school. I was 16 years old. I did not want to be there.
mm,
Capitalize every single word.
mhm.
My father, I lived in Crown Heights. My father put me in. My friends were going to public school. They were having parties, and I didn't have all those parties and all the fun that I thought they were having. At the end, they weren't having so much fun. And I was so angry, and I think I did everything wrong to be expelled. And you wouldn't expel me. Then one day, I said, I have to talk to you. I came into the office, and that time we still had those black, those black rotary phones, that kind of
Right.
thing.
Sure.
And I said
Yes.
to the secretary, do not disturb me. I have a very important meeting. And when you came
Mhm.
into the office, you said, have a seat. And you said, I just am pressing do not disturb. You did have a choice of doing that button. And all of a sudden, I realized it. I am so important. I am such an important meeting that you are telling everyone do not disturb. Wow, what's going on here? She says, I never became an angel, but I
Yeah.
definitely stayed in school. And she took out of her pocketbook pictures of her son, living in Brighton, a Jewish woman, married a Jewish woman, having children. Who remember that? Or somebody once told me, that was the people that I taught in second grade when I was 16 years old, and now great grandmothers said,
Wow.
when I was in second grade, somebody scribbled on my beautiful pink backpack, and you went out and bought me a new pink backpack. I don't remember that.
Wow.
Now, I think we
Mhm.
earned at that time $40 a week, and I think half the checks bounced. So I must have taken money from my parents to buy the backpack. But she
Right.
remembered. And just now, last week, I was at my sister's Chabad house in Great Neck, and a girl comes over to me. She says, do you remember me? Not a girl, a woman. I said, no. She says, do you remember? The shift got a lot of drama. When Rabbi Hecht successfully brought out a lot of Iranian children, all of a
Mhm.
sudden, we got an influx of hundreds, I'm not exaggerating, of hundreds of girls. And the Crown Heights community was unbelievable. People don't talk about this part of history of Crown Heights. They took these children into their homes, let alone there were a lot of culture gaps. They would be served cereal and milk for breakfast. They wanted rice. But
Mhm.
homes took these children in, and some stayed for years. Some stayed in Crown Heights, some went all over. Great Neck is a very large community of Persian Jews. I remember.
I just interviewed we have this week Rabbi Danny Yiftach, who was
Oh,
from
sure.
Iran. So, yes, he spoke about that, how
So
incredible the community was.
she
Yes.
reminded me. She reminded me of things I never remembered. How we hired I don't even know if this woman is today, a wonderful woman, and I must say her name, Edna Astulin. She was the only person we knew who spoke Farsi. And we
Mm.
hired her someplace from someplace else, and she taught the girls. And we didn't have enough classrooms, so we had like in the broom closet, literally, and the steps all over. And at one point, we had so many, and then eventually, many moved to other places. Many found relatives. Many had their parents come, and some stayed in Crown Heights. As a matter of fact, a person who works in Pacific High School till today, Sarah Coxeter Friedman, she was one of those people, and she was raised by a
Mm.
family in Crown Heights. So as I said, I can one day when I write my book, I have a lot of things to write
Yeah.
about, but this is all part of chinuch, accepting the children what they were,
So
completely
is it
different
because you
culture.
is it 'cause you
I'm sorry.
cared? Is it just that you cared so much? Is that
Well,
what it
so
is?
you say, how do you know every child? Every child is an individual. Every child is a world, and you have a fantastic, dedicated staff, and you have hopefully parents who work with you. Then every child is a person, not a name on a roster. Now, I
Mhm.
must be very honest and tell you that I knew some girls better than others.
Mhm.
Because
Of
some were
course.
more articulate, some were more
Mm.
expressive, some or maybe more trouble. So I spent more time with them.
Right.
But
Right.
what I really believe, and I just once wrote an article about it for COL, is an invisible child. When you
Mhm.
look at a classroom, there are those who are extremely active and outgoing and like, I don't want to call them the queen bees in a derogatory sense, but in a positive sense. They have leadership
Mhm.
abilities. And then there are those people who sometimes act in an inappropriate way. And we focus so much of our attention on them. The ones who are very outgoing and articulate and bright, and the ones who unfortunately sometimes can cause disruption in class. And there in the back sits that
Mm.
girl who for
Mhm.
4 years may not open up her mouth unless she's called on. And then she'll blush and she'll just mumble something under her breath, and the teacher won't call on her again. And even the
Mhm.
girls, they'll talk over her by lunch. Just sits there. That's whatever name you want to call her, Sprinza. That's not a common name in Bystrivka. That's why I'm using that name.
Mhm.
And she just sits there. She's like an invisible girl. But she's
Mhm.
not invisible. And it's specifically those girls that we have to pay attention to
Mhm.
because they are individuals. They have feelings, they have wants, they have needs, they have emotions, they have skills, they have abilities. And the goal of a teacher and of an educator is to find the tools to reach those who sometimes are invisible by choice, sometimes are invisible because we're put into that position.
Mhm.
So again, I don't know every girl equally. Some I know very well, some I know more. But I think that I would say I know every girl in my school. You must also
Mm.
remember, I came into school at 100 high school students. Today
Mhm.
it's 700. I didn't
Wow.
come into 700 girls. I came
Mhm.
into 100. So I grew with the school. So
Mhm.
therefore, someone who came in now can't know all the girls. She can't. It's humanly impossible. But I grew with them. And so as I grew, they grew. I made mistakes along the way. They were sometimes, unfortunately, I'm sure they suffered from my mistakes. Then I learned new things. Then I learned different things. And I believe that I'm trying to think if I change my philosophy of education. I believe that the goals remain the same. Our objectives remain the same. We want to raise a child who, beyond the classroom, as we would say in Yiddish, is a mensch, is a person that has good interpersonal relationship, that works on their own midot, on their own characteristics, who gives to the world, not just takes. In the classroom, learns how to use their thinking skills, whatever they may be, learns how to utilize their potential. So our goals have not changed. A Beshivka girl, we want her to be a happy Bas Yisrael, Bas Chabad. We want her to be a giver. But you know what has to change? The tools we use to attain our
Mm.
goals. And
Mhm.
therefore, although you can be a fantastic teacher 40 years ago, and yet, as whatever tools you used then were great. Today, because the students have many more things that may interest them, because there is many, instant gratification. I
Mm.
just click on my phone. If I want, artificial intelligence will write everything for me,
That's
I
right.
just, I don't need, I don't have to be there anymore almost. So that's why, as a principal, I don't really, I mean, the principal, not as a principal, but as a principal, I really refrain from using it because I
Mhm.
just feel, hey, you're going to take over my responsibilities one day. I don't want that to happen. So our tools have to change. Today in
Mhm.
education, we have to be much more interactive. We have to be much more listening to students. But then again, when I think about it, it's not new. Go back in
Mhm.
times of the Talmud. How do they learn? They're at Chavrusa. I'll never forget
Right.
it. They had a maturgaman. Like Chafsia was a maturgaman. He's one of the 10 people who were killed by the Romans. They would go around in the back and explain to the students who couldn't understand. There, there was a din of noise. If you'd walk into the time of the Talmud into a learning hall, I don't think you'd need earphones. I mean, you couldn't hear.
Mhm.
It was loud.
Sure.
Everybody's talking. Or even today, if you walk into yeshiva, you think they're arguing or fighting. But no, that creates thinking skills. And it's okay to
Right.
disagree because the way of
Right.
learning is questioning. So therefore, that's why I feel our tools have to go back to what it was once upon a time. And
Do
then,
do you
go
you
ahead.
you seem like a very intuitive person, though, like, you're feeling about that girl with the yellow jacket. D Is it something that you can learn or pick up, or is it something that's
I think
inborn when you are
any person who grows up with a Torah life becomes intuitive because
Mhm,
that's what it's all about. I mean,
mhm,
one reads the ethics of the fathers. So many details there. How to behave to another person. And it lists all the 10 things. Be a good listener. And one can think be a good listener is a new phenomenon. No, be a good
mhm,
listener was said thousands of years ago.
mhm,
Gemayim hapanim el hapanim, how another person reflects your face. That is intuitive. That is, if you smile, I'll smile. If you frown, I'll frown. That sounds like some modern ideas. It's not. If you go to cognitive behavioral therapy, you can find it all. You find it
mhm.
all first of all, of course, in the Torah. And Chassidus is another added dimension, but it's the same Torah. So it's all there. So
So
if
you
you
think
grow,
anyone could be a teacher or anyone could be a principal if they
okay, so that's a very good question. Anybody, in order to be a teacher, first you have to have a love for it. I believe that if you need training, you can be an intuitive teacher, but ultimately you cannot be successful in the classroom as much as you have to be because you do need training. What is training? Training gives you, like the hacks, the tricks of the trade. How do you have? I gave a course. How do you have a responsive classroom? Responsive to what? Responsive to students' needs. Responsive to safety. Responsive to
Mhm,
teachers' needs. How do you have a responsive classroom? So that you can have intuition about, you can just maybe understand it, but you really need the training how to create the systems and the protocols to have that
mhm,
responsive classroom. So I do
mhm,
think you need training. Just like a
mhm,
shoemaker, I'm sorry, not that shoemaker is not an important job. It's a very important job. If you don't do the shoes properly, a person can't walk. So just some of the Tanaim were shoemakers. Like a
mhm,
shoemaker needs training, a teacher needs training. But I also believe that some people do have the ability to be more articulate than others.
mhm,
Sometimes it's because, I have grandchildren who are growing up in Chabad houses. They can be like 9, 10 years old, 7 years old. They have no problem getting up in front of hundreds of people and speaking.
mhm. Right.
Why? Because they're growing up in an environment where it's unconditional acceptance. Everybody thinks they're the cutest people in the whole wide world. And so they just speak. They were interviewed. One of them was interviewed actually by somebody. He's the one who just turned 13. He gave what is a shliach, and he gave a whole explanation better than I could do. Why? Because
Right.
he grew up with confidence. I think
Mhm,
my home, we live next to 770 Eastern Parkway, which is at the headquarters of Chabad. So we always had guests, always. The Lubavitch Rebbe would have Saturday gatherings on Saturday at 1:30 or 2, I think it was 1:30. Davening was over at 12. People would come and just come and make kiddush and just talk and hang around because they had to be someplace. We always had guests. As
mhm,
children, we were very confident speaking to our guests. As children, we would make the guests feel comfortable. It was our responsibility to make sure that every guest feels they're at home. So we grew up like that. So I think that if depends on the home you come from. This was like a funny thing. It happened once. I don't know, funny or maybe very, 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 very special. We were by Yechidus. I was 9 years old. We went into a private audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. At that time, it was possible. I was 9 years old. We had just moved to New York, and my brother was 3. It's a different story. But my brother, Zalman al Vashalom, and the Rebbe asked me what I'm learning. And I told him I'm learning that Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh, and Aaron spoke. He asked me, why did Aaron speak? And I leisurely started telling the Rebbe a story. And my father was giving me these looks. My mother was saying, going into the Rebbe, every minute was precious. You just didn't tell stories.
Right.
I'm going to tell you my story. And there was a crown and a whole story about the crown, on and on. It must have been 2 minutes. But to my parents, it seemed like an hour. They were trying to shush me. No, I'm continuing my story. The Rebbe told me the end, good gesagt. I said it
Wow.
well. I think that gave me the confidence not to have
To keep talking.
to keep talking. You know, I have no
Right.
problem speaking to 1,000 people. Actually, I don't like doing this. I don't like speaking on Zoom. That's not my choice because
Ye
I like seeing people in real life. But
right.
it's really a reality that it comes with the idea that we have a teacher is a salesman. We have something very great to sell. A Chabad shliach is a salesman. You are a sales lady. You
Mm,
are selling people stories that have
mhm,
impact on people's lives.
mhm.
So I think that a good salesman knows they have to have, first of all, you read a book, from Dale Carnegie, he'll tell you how to speak and how to do. But first, you need a good product. If you're selling
Right.
an old vacuum cleaner, you can be the most articulate, oily snake salesperson, snake oil person, salesman, as they would call it. You have nothing to sell. If you have a good product, and
Right.
we have Torah, and we have a lifestyle based on Torah, if you really believe in it, you could sell it. I'm going to conclude
Mhm.
this point by saying, um, they say a story about a chassid that came to be a shliach in an emissary in a town where everybody spoke English. So he didn't speak any English. So he used to stand in the corner and say, I yid, you yid, and then he'd give the person a hug. And let me tell you, he has impacted upon the lives of hundreds of people, hundreds.
Right. For sure.
So you
100%.
have that
Wow.
intensity, you have that
Incredible.
MS, and you have truth. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It's a
I'm
language of
wondering
love.
100%. I'm wondering what it was like as a woman, with children, as a young young mother, how it was to be struggling with juggling it all. You had such an intense responsibility, and
Now I
here
think
you
while
also had your own children
I
at a
think
time when it wasn't so much done.
Well, first of all, I think while it's happening, you don't feel you're juggling. You just do what you have to
Mhm.
do.
Right.
Actually, when you say it wasn't done so much, I just want to say that it was very interesting. When the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke the whole discourse, that the mother of Shmuel, Chana, did not go to the place where the temporary temple was, even though she was a very well-to-do woman and she could afford to take babysitters, she didn't go. All of us had a quandary. Maybe we shouldn't be teaching. So
Mhm.
Chana Gurwitz, my friend who was the principal of seminary, and I and many teachers wrote a letter to the Rebbe. Should we do what we're doing or not? In other words, the question was, is it appropriate for women to have an outside um, shlichus, or I don't want to use the word career, but mission, and at the same time have responsibilities at home? The Rebbe
Mhm.
answered first. I just checked. Answered first of all, it's up to the individual, and um, the anybody. Well, he mentioned about Beis Rivka because anybody who works in Beis Rivka, the school of my father-in-law, and it applies to anything, any kind of work like this. Schus harabim, the fact that they are empowering rabim, many people, they're helping, impacting positively, but others is going to stand by them,
Mhm.
and that means it's going to give them the ability to be able to do both. Now, was it easy? Not always. Was it meaningful? Always.
Mhm.
First of all, you need a very supportive husband. And, my husband remembers getting up 2 o'clock in the morning and feeding the baby.
Wow.
At that time, he didn't nurse for some reason. I don't know why, but that's the way it was. Second of all, you have to believe in what you're doing. And I must say, this is a very practical thing. You need help. All
Mhm.
my life, I always had a babysitter in my home, and I always had cleaning help. And I really always, and I believe that gave me the opportunity to do this. We were blessed with children, and our oldest child and our youngest child are apart 21 years. I used
Wow.
to say for 21 years, I was involved with helping children find their bashert and diapering babies,
Right.
exactly like that.
Right.
And, and then some people ask me, how do you do it? I said, I didn't have to in a hurry have 13 children at one time. It
Wow.
happened one by one.
Wow,
And,
13 children. Did
and
you ever
each
feel
one,
guilty? Did you ever feel like you weren't giving each place its own proper due?
Jewish mothers are made of guilt.
Of
But
course.
but I must say that I have a very, very strong belief, and I tell this to my daughters. Guilt is a meaningless emotion unless it's
Mhm,
accompanied by action. Just to sit
mhm,
there. And be guilty is meaningless. I don't believe in that. Just a waste of time and energy. The idea is to do something. So my children weren't all born at the same time. I have amazing children, thank God, but that's not me. That's Yata Deshmaya. That means the help of God. My husband's grandfather um, always said he had a very large family and he went through the Holocaust and everything, and said, "To what you attribute all your children, or whatever they were wonderful children." And he said that, um, you know what? It's Yata Deshmaya. It's really God's help. It's the Rebbe's brachas. The Rebbe told us, take our children to Torah Chuppah Ma'asem Tovim. Take our children to a future of a life, of a meaning, of a life of meaning. So that gave it to us. And honestly, also protocols and systems. I'm not a list person, but in the area of raising children, there had to be systems. Of course, you don't always follow them. My children have a joke. Sometimes it's said bittersweetly that I raised my younger children very differently than I raised my older children.
Of course.
And like,
Our
I said,
kids always tell us that,
Ma,
right?
younger kids always went on trips with you, of course. We went to visit our children across the world. Ma, when we were growing up, we had to be in bed by 7:31. Frady, my youngest daughter, who's 30 now, she can be up. She can be up all hours. She's
Right.
31, actually. I did not have, all these 13 children did not have the same mother. Each child had a different mother and father. Each child had to be reared in their own way. Each one is an individual. As I say, I'm in awe of my children, every single one of them. And it's really Siyata Deshmaya. I do say, and I said this to the person who I trained to take over my job, a wonderful person, Mrs. Miriam Heber and Beis Rivka, that when we once had a family reunion, we played a game, and everyone had to write one thing they would change from their childhood. And lo and behold, they all wrote the same thing. Mommy should not have been on the phone so much after supper. And
Wow.
I talk to a lot of principals, young principals. I believe in youth, and you can be 25 and 26 and become a principal. I tell them, do one favor to yourself and to your family. The hours your children are home, put your phone away. You have to keep an emergency number, of availability to look at it. You never know what happens. But you have to give that attention time to your family. I didn't always do that, and that's a mistake, I suppose. But on the other hand, we weren't so wise then. They say you should give wisdom when you're young. The wisdom when what you attain when you get older, when you're young. But then you wouldn't have believed it. If somebody would have
Right.
told me at that point, well, don't speak to Mrs. X. Come on, your children come first. I would say, yeah, but. And
Right.
that's the way we were. So I do tell this to my children. And I do believe that many of my children, they have this thing, that supper hour, even though they're very busy shluchim, educators. I have children in education. I have children who have Chabad houses. They all know one thing, that try to be home by supper, if possible. I mean, it's not always possible. You have meetings at night. You have to do things. So what I tell young people today is that if you believe in both of your journeys, actually, it's more than two journeys. It's three. It's being a spouse. It's being a mother, and being whatever you are, an educator or shlucha, whatever you may be, in any helping profession that you may be. If you believe in what you're doing, you can figure it out. You'll make mistakes along the way, but it's doable if you have, I don't like to use this expression, a higher calling, because that sounds like a higher calling, not so high. But the
Right.
idea, if you have an overwhelming motivation, and children do come along. Like children, I was very careful never to speak. In addition to my children, I had all my nieces live in my house. So when I was 27,
Wow.
I was a mother
Wow.
to teenagers. I had my nieces live in my house. I have an older sister. There was no education. Her oldest daughter, who now is a grandmother, of course, a grandmother. She lived in my home for years. I have another niece lived in my home for 7 years. I had grandchildren live in my home. Then I had other young teenagers live in my home, temporarily some. And it was very, very busy times. And I say to my husband now, how did I do it then if I'm so busy now? I can't figure that one out. That's really a
Wow.
puzzle. But the truth is that you put one foot in front of the other,
Are you a
and
person
do
who
it.
has a lot of energy? Are you very
I have a lot
energetic?
of energy, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I have a lot of energy, and not just that, I have a very, very supportive family. My husband's very supportive. My mother, when she was alive, used to come over and say, "Oh, my kid, garnish a guess, my child, you didn't eat anything. Here, I made something for you." My mother,
Right.
my mother, my mother was a businesswoman. My mother, in addition to everything else, she ran a business. My parents had a knitting factory. She didn't come home till 7 o'clock in the evening. And I
Oh,
remember,
wow.
I have a sister who's 18 years younger than I am. I remember taking care of her and giving her supper because my mother was really not home till very late in the evening, yet somehow she managed. She managed everything. She always had guests. And again,
Mm,
it's not being a superwoman. It is just believing that you do what you have to do and you do it with a smile. Because the moment you feel like you're a martyr, the moment a
mm,
mother or anybody feels they're doing a favor, it can't work because everybody
mhm,
picks up those vibes and then they begin to feel guilty. And what did I do wrong? What did I do right? I tell that to all young teachers. I speak a lot. Nowadays, I do a lot of speaking to young principals. And I tell them, organize your life. Know the evening hours is for your family. Know the school hours are for the school. So the only person you answer when they call in school is your husband or your child. And they know
mhm.
not to call. So they're not going to call unless it's a real, real emergency.
Wow, amazing. There's so many things I wanna ask you, but I wanna get also to your daughter that passed away. Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, I'm sitting now in my living room and I can't turn around the camera. And on the wall, we have a big picture. And that's a picture of Minna. And Minna is smiling because that's what she was. She wasn't a saint, but she was a child. Let me tell you a little bit about her and we are where we are today because it's a never ending journey. Minna was born, she was a regular, wonderful little girl. And she was my first girl. I have a daughter, Khani, who was the only girl among six boys.
Mm,
And she was treated like a princess. And then, after 12 years, Minna was born. It was the biggest joy in the world because finally a little girl, and she was a regular little girl, all the normal milestones a child has. When she was 2 years old, she started losing weight. And I was standing with my sister's son, bar mitzvah, in my mother's home. And I remember, you remember moments? My sister is a gourmet cook, and she was making a two-colored soup, one side green and one side orange. I think it was butternut squash and something green. And we were two people had to pour the soup because it should mingle. I'm
mm,
pouring one, she's pouring the other, and we're pouring soup. And the phone rings. It was my husband. I remember that time we had the rotary phones. He had gone 1 minute to a doctor to find out why she had purple under her eyes. And her
mhm,
Dr. Feldman, of Shalom, sent her to a specialist. And he was there a whole day and did all the scans. And she had a cancer called neuroblastoma. At
mhm,
that time, neuroblastoma was very rare in the United States. And she was taken to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. And she was 2 years old, and I'm there in the hospital for Shabbos. And I'm standing by her window, looking out. And I see little kids playing outside, and they're in their jump rope. It's like upper Manhattan, all kinds of little kids, and they're playing, Chinese jump rope and this kind of jump rope, and they're on bikes and on scooters. And I'm thinking to myself, my child will never do this because I was just told by a doctor that Minna has
mhm,
6 weeks to live. I should quit
mhm,
my job and take care because there's nothing more they could do. There's nothing they could do. She was just in the hospital for 5 days. They decided there's nothing they could do. And
mhm,
so I was I remember this was a moment of darkness, pure desperation. My child will never do this. This is it. And I remember falling into my husband wasn't there, it was Shabbos, I was alone, and such a deep sense of a dark hole, literally a dark hole. Like I can't get out of it, like I'm being choked, like I'm being pushed down. And then suddenly I realized something. Excuse me, who is this doctor? Did this doctor give
mhm,
Minna her life? Was
mhm,
he involved in her birth? Who is he to tell me how long my child will live? There's only one entity that gives life and takes life, and that's my God. So I am going to believe that my Hashem, my God, who loves me, because God loves me, He's going to give her all the years that she needs in her life. And I don't have to quit my job, and I can stay and do what I'm doing, and Minna will be well. 5 years passed. During those 5 years, Minna had ups and downs. Minna was the kind of kid, and I'll just share some stories about her because I love talking about it. And maybe somebody listening will hear and maybe it will impact them when I share these stories with places that I spoke. I later got emails, I really did this and this. And what was one of the things? Minna had a bone marrow transplant. And a bone marrow transplant, you're in complete isolation, but completely. No one can walk in. When doctors and nurses walked in, it's like during COVID, they had to wear all the protective
mhm,
gear because she had no immune system. You just destroy the
mhm,
whole immune system and you give no new marrow. She was in a room in Sloan Kettering all by herself. My mother was with her. Now I remember she had a little pretty curtain on the window. People shouldn't peek in. I remember Razel Lavovsky, Shalom, a very good friend of ours, and her preschool teacher make a little curtain of olive base for her.
Mm.
And at that point, she was about 4.5, 5 years old. And she had remission, and she was in remission, out of remission. And then they said they needed a transplant. And Minna said to my mother, Bubby, I want to put on clothing for Shabbos. I want to get all
Mm.
dressed up. And my mother said, Minala, it's so hard. You have so many tubes. And she was very sensitive. She only could wear 100% pure clothing, pure cotton clothing. And my darling friends went and they sourced for her pure cotton clothing. And that time she
Mm.
was wearing a little night hospital gown of cotton. And she had tubes all over her body. And my mother said, Minala, it's so hard. And anyway, mother said, no one's going to see you. It's a weekend. Even doctors don't come in. And Minna said, Bubby, I don't understand. The Shabbos queen is coming.
Mm.
I have to get
Oh.
dressed up. And so she did.
Mm.
And from that point on, everybody who I say the story to has tried, most people anyway, not everybody, has tried to make some kind of effort not to go down and light Shabbos candles wearing your bathrobe.
Mm.
Another example of Minna is Minna actually she went to school. She used to go to chemo and go to school. From 6 weeks, it became 1 year after the other, after the other, and after the other. And she was in first grade. And I remember in kindergarten when she went to the hospital, she'd come back to school. At that time, Oshkosh caps were very in. Before you
Mm.
were born, it was actually 37 years ago. No, maybe you were a little girl. and and she would come and wear her
Or
little
more than
Oshkosh
that,
cap,
yeah.
and the little girls would say to her, Minna, what happened to your hair? She would say, God gave me hair. God's going to give me back hair. She was a very
Mhm.
feisty little self-confident
Wow.
girl. She'd go to Fabrengens, and even no matter what, the Rebbe would always have some kind of connection, like some kind of reaction to her. Anyway, she was 7 years old, and it was her birthday. It Gimel Kislev in December. And we made this beautiful birthday party because she was completely in remission. She was in remission for over
Mm.
a long time, over a year. And she was like, you can't say healed because you're not healed till 5 years, but a very long time. And she wanted a birthday cake all the 7 days of creation. And we had, as we said, we combined a birthday together with Suda Soda, like a Thanksgiving meal, thanking benediction to God for saving this child. And adults were in one room and children were in the other room. You have a video of it. And she was so happy. Everything was so beautiful. And it was Hanukkah, she had a little fever. And when you have fever after going through chemo and radiation,
Mm.
you have to go to the hospital. And this was one time
Mm.
she said, Ma, I don't want to go. He said, no, Minna, you have to go. At that time we were in Westchester because we had switched from Memorial Sloan Kettering to Westchester because the doctor switched. At either point, we went to the hospital and she was fine. And they were just observing her and she was engaged in an arts and crafts activity. She was taking a little, I gave her like a white shirt and with puff paint, she was writing her name.
Mm.
And she jumped up and down on the bed and she fell backwards. And that hospital, the sink was right next to the bed. And she went
Wow.
into a coma, but she never recovered. And the hospital, the staff was crying on Chav Gimel Tavis when she passed away. And I said to the doctor, Dr. Helston was his name, Dr. Helston, why are you crying? You are a pediatric oncologist. You see death. He says, I never ever thought this would happen to Minna. She was like our star. We saved her life.
Mm.
And he said, God saved her life. Minna was the kind of child in the hospital. She actually empowered people. She gave shmura matzah to a doctor. As a matter of fact, just a few years ago, our son in Berlin had to call a doctor in Sloan Kettering. And he called this doctor. He didn't, and the secretary said he's at a meeting. She said, okay, just say that Yudi Teichtel is calling. He called back. He says, are you Minna's brother? That was,
Mm.
let's say, 30 years later. He still remembered her. There's another doctor who lives in New Jersey now who actually said Minna empowered her to become a Torah observant person. We met her many
Wow.
times. So that was Minna. So then Minna passed away. Okay, we were sitting Shiva. It was, the 7 days of mourning. And 11 o'clock at night, there's a bell rings and a lady comes in. And I recognized her. She had lost her own daughter a year before, also in Minna's class, to a car accident. But I didn't really know her. It was weird. Like she's coming 11 o'clock at night and she says, we were all sitting around, my little children and us. My oldest child was like 20 then, younger. And he says to us, she says, what are you going to do for your daughter now? So I said, cry. She says, no,
Mm.
but what are you doing for her? You know, when your child was alive, you made parties, you gave her gifts. What can you do for your child now? She says, I'll tell you. Each child, each human being has a soul. The soul never departs. The soul lives forever. And the soul, when you do a good deed in that person's memory, an angel comes forth and says, Mina, Alta Mina, we added the name, Alta Bachi Shloma. You have a gift waiting for you. And it's wrapped
Mm.
in a beautiful paper with a big bow. And every good deed that you do goes to her credit, to her soul's credit. And she really made us think. And at that night, my little kids and all of us, what can we do that was never done in Crown Heights? What does it need? So we started a small contest that children did mitzvahs, and they sent us. We have the whole list. Then our children said, Minna made people happy. She always smiled. Let's do something which will make people smile. So at that very moment, in that night of Shiva, we changed from darkness, we changed the narrative completely to lightness. Minna lived. Minna was part of our family. We will talk about her. We will laugh about her. We will rejoice with her. And we will do things in her memory. We'll make a living legacy. So take the darkness and transform it into light. We created an organization called Karen Alta Minna. We started it 36 years ago, and it's still going strong. While I'm talking to you, two people came to get stuff, and my cleaning lady gave it to them. So what did we do? We want to make children smile. So we did many different things. We put Jewish books in doctors' offices. We brought Jewish books to Sloan Kettering all over in different hospitals. We also we don't have that anymore, but we opened a clothing gmach, like people can get clothing for $2. That we don't do anymore, but we
Mm.
still do baby furniture. Till
Mm.
today, we give people when they have a moment of such joy of a child being born. And I thought it's not really true and just use it in my like marketing. But just this Friday, somebody came, a woman who is a single mother of a year and a half old child. She told me her baby actually was sleeping in a drawer covered with some kind of linen. She had no crib,
Wow.
and her
Wow.
friend came to pick everything up on Friday. So
Mm.
that's what we try to do: transform Minna's life into life.
Mm.
Yes. Is it easy? No. Losing a child, no one should know from it. Like part of you is lost.
Mm.
It's like an amputated leg. I don't know. I never had one, but I can imagine. You still
Mm.
walk. You learn how to walk. You may
Mm.
use maybe you may need different aids. You may need different things, and you've learned how to put one step before the other.
Mm.
Is it easy? No. But we have belief. When I was in Sloan Kettering, there was a parents group. I didn't usually go, but one time I did go, and they were discussing a book. I don't want to go into details of that book, but the basic point was, how do you go on? How do you believe in God after something like this happens?
Mm.
That book was written by a rabbi, and he had his theory about it. It was a different approach than we have. And, and I looked around the room, all mothers of children who were ill, and everybody there was a believing person. Because you can't forge ahead, you can't go ahead if you don't believe. We're often called to speak to parents who have lost a child and who are grieving. Just recently, we were out of town by our daughter in Florida, and somebody asked us if he can speak to us. He had lost his daughter and as an adult, and we spent a long time with him. And he said, "But how do you go on?" I said, if you believe there's a big dark hole and just a dark void, it's very hard to go on. But if you
Mm.
believe that a human being is more than just uh, flesh and blood, if you believe there's meaning in life, if you believe that there's a God in this world, and you can go, we don't understand. We'll never
Mm.
understand. And you know what? I don't even want to understand. Because if I understand, it would make it easier. So is it
Mm.
easy? No. During our life, my life, we've had many tragedies. I lost three young brothers,
Mm.
completely unnecessary, complete one a few days before his wedding. One was last year. I went to my granddaughter's wedding in Berlin, and I came back before the wedding because it was unfortunately his funeral.
Mm.
And we're surrounded by death. I asked my in-laws, my father and mother-in-law, were Holocaust survivors because my parents went to the Russian Gulag. They didn't go through the Holocaust. And my father was an educator and an author, my father-in-law. I said, how? And he smiled. And he was a happy person. How do you do it? And he said, I don't understand why it happened. I have no excuses for it. But what's the option?
Mm.
What choice is there? To sit in bed and cry? Last year was this year. This year, I was in September in Israel, and Shlucha Chana Canterman asked me to speak on Thursday. Every Thursday since October 7th, she gets together a group of women, and a member of a hostage speaks to them and tells about that person. The person becomes real, not just a name that you say to Tehillim for.
Mm.
And so she said, "Can you?" She says, "I'm so tired. I'm doing this for a year and a half. Could you please come and speak instead of me?" I just gotten off the
Mm.
plane. I said, "Okay, sure." And my daughters went along with
Mm.
me. They also came to my grandson's wedding. And I walked in, there were like maybe 120 women, all kinds of women. It's in the center of Jerusalem, and a mother of a hostage. And she told her story. Her name was Esther. I was in awe of this woman because there was a singer there. And usually the singer sings like slow songs. She says, "No, I want," she's broken English, "I want happy, 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 happy."
Mhm.
I said, "Esther, how do you do it?" And superficially, you might not think she's a Torah observant woman. She says, "Because Yesh Elokim, and I know
Mm.
it's going to be good." Why do you think that the song Tova Yoter Tov became like an anthem in Israel? Because how do
Mhm.
you go on if you don't believe it? So we
Mhm.
believe there's a God in this world. We believe that God loves me. And every person out there who's surrounded by blackness, sometimes God loves us. And if sometimes we don't feel it, it's because we created a shell or a wall. And slowly, we have to start picking away at it. And if this God loves me, did something I don't understand, so I don't understand. Does it make me happy? No.
Mm.
Is sadness there? Yes, but not despair. Because sadness
Mm.
can be conducive to further action. We just had a campaign for Karen Alterman. Now, we only do it once in 4 years. And I think we had 400 or something donors. It wasn't the money, it was the notes that people brought.
Mm.
35 years ago, 30 years ago, you helped me, whatever. They gave $18, $10, it doesn't matter if they wanted to give. So, my point is that losing a child is, I think, the worst nightmare that anybody can go through. It is a
Mm.
nightmare. I'm not in any way lessening the sadness, the impact of it, the darkness of it. It impacts the entire family, all of us. We had discussions with our children. At that time, there was minimal therapy, not so much. But we
Mhm.
have talk therapy among ourselves. We talk about Minna. I have grandchildren named Minna. Each one knows the
Mm.
story about her. Everyone knows about Minna. It's like part of our lives. But each one has to choose how they want to mourn differently. I have a friend who lost a child. They don't talk about the child because that's how they
Mhm.
feel they want to deal with it. This works
Mm.
for us. Doesn't mean it works
Mhm.
for everyone. But one thing
Mhm.
does work for everyone, I truly believe, and that is to have something to hold onto so you don't fall into despair. Because once you
Mm.
go down the spiral of despair, it's so hard to get yourself back up. And therefore, as people who believe and that there's more to life than what we simply see with our own mortal eyes, it's still hard because you have to hold on to it. And if you just let it go, like a slippery slope, and then you go
Mm.
down. So that's really, it's part of our life. That's why I say the journey's not over. It's
Mm.
still here. And to be a very honest person and transparent, sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning, I think if only Minna would have been at this child's wedding, only if Minna would have been
Mm.
around the table. But that's okay. I have to face the reality of it that Minna is not physically here. But we are her family and we'll love her forever. And she's part of us and we're part of her. And that's what it's all about.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. Do you ever feel like you wish you would have spent more time there, that you wished you had quit school, or no?
No, because this
No.
is who I was and this is who she was. This is who our family was, and this is who we were. The only thing I
Right.
sometimes wish is that we didn't have that old station wagon. Years ago, there was a station wagon, and I remember we never could fit into it. I have two children who were born after Minna passed away. And I have a son, Levi, who was a baby when Minna passed away.
Mm.
He was born that year in the summer, and she passed away that December. I remember when he was born, I was in the hospital with Minna. One second. When he was born, I was in the hospital, and Minna was in the hospital. And my
Mm.
my beautiful bungalow colony, they made the bris for him. I'll never forget
Wow.
that. I wasn't there for his bris, but in either case, after she passed away, we had two children. Our first child we called Bracha because it's a blessing. The next
Mm.
child we called Freda, which means
Mm.
happiness. But
Mhm.
it's also named after an aunt of mine. But the idea is that every child brings happiness. I do want to add
Mhm.
something about children. When I was a girl, I was the furthest away from having 2.1 children. I went to visit my husband's cousins who actually live in the house which I'm sitting in now. We bought it from them, and they had 15 children. Now,
Yeah.
the largest family in Crown Heights at that time was maybe was my family and another family, 7 children. And my mother was pregnant with my sister. I was 18 years old. I was so embarrassed. My mother's pregnant. I'm 18 years old. So it was like so. So we was so not so. It wasn't just part of my life of my Weltanschauung. We went to visit my mother's, my husband's aunt, cousin. They were cousins. We sat at the same table dining room we have now, not the same table. And I was thinking to myself, she must be a baby machine. And she sat there like a
Mm.
queen. I remember her. They were in Chabad. She was a very Hasidic woman. She was wearing a black suit and a white blouse with a bow. And she was wearing a blonde shaitel and a beautiful black hat with a feather. And I said to her, I was a little chutzpahdik American girl. I said to her, I heard you had Yiddish. I said in Yiddish, I heard you had 15 children. Like, how do you manage? She said, I didn't, they were from Oberländer. They spoke like a different Yiddish a little bit. But the point was that when you educate children, they learn. They learn how to get along. They learn. It's not 15 children. It's 15 individuals who learn how to live together and in one home.
Mm.
And then when God blessed us, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke a lot about families blessed with children. And at first, it was very strange to me. And then when God gave us this blessing of having children, I can't imagine otherwise. Like, what would I do if I wouldn't have my Frady? You know what I mean? So,
Wow.
like, so it's really,
Wow.
really a blessing. And I just also want to say, and if somebody is not has different blessings in life, not necessarily of children, they can find joy in whatever they have. Each
Mhm.
person is given their, as they say, their package, their peckle, with
Mhm.
all the good and all the. Sometimes you have to climb the ladder, but with the story of that Rebbe that was going up a slippery mountain, and there was a person in the community who was mocking him and laughing at him. And because this Rebbe, how could he get up this mountain? It was such an icy mountain, but someone made it. So this guy who was like a new Haskalah person said, if he can do it, I can do it too. And he tried climbing the mountain. He kept on falling down. And he came to the Rebbe. He says, well, how come you do it and I can't? He says, when you hold on to the top, you don't fall to the bottom. So in
Mhm.
every aspect of our lives, whatever God gives us, whatever role we're in, if we hold on to something meaningful, it helps us not to slip and to fall down.
Beautiful. Mrs. Teichtel, thank you so much for joining us. I could sit and listen to you for another hour, but the time is running
Oh,
out, and I know
please.
you're so busy. But thank you so much. This was
I
so
must say
incredible.
something personal to you. I never knew you even had podcasts. But then after you called me, I started listening yesterday and I couldn't stop. I can tell you about every podcast you had. I started with Chai Tilden. I went on and on and on and on and on. And I was really I was amazed that you are able to ask questions that are so targeted and people reply in ways that I was inspired. And B, that the using technology in such a
Mhm.
positive way. We all talk
Mhm.
against technology, technology, technology. The Rebbe used to put bring on TV shows for a
That's
reason.
right.
So thank you for doing what you do. It was honestly a pleasure, and thank
And
you.
thank you for
And
everything that you've done and for raising so many generations of students who are doing such good things and doing it with such full heart and really teaching us what a teacher is all about and how we're all teachers. And I think that was really so fascinating.
all the best, and thank you so much.
Wow, what a fascinating woman, Mrs. Sheindel Teichtel. For over 50 years, she's a principal of a school. I loved how she speaks about chinuch, about education, with such passion, how she sees it as such a calling, and how she sees all of us as really involved in chinuch, in education, in whatever capacity that we're at. I loved how she adapts herself with the different tools for the new generation and makes herself so relevant to them. But I think what was the key here was her care and her concern, how she looked at individuals, that yellow jacket that she spoke about of that student, how she noticed it. These things are what make a difference and what really bring a stellar educator to the front, because it's when you care about people and when you care about what they're doing and about them and their lives that really makes an impact on our students, and what caused her to make so much impact on so many students the world over. I really appreciated how she shared her story about her daughter. It was so beautiful in a sad kind of way, but in also such a heroic kind of way. How she explained it so articulately, how it felt like like your foot was amputated, but it's when you go forward with that meaning and with that purpose and bringing that light to the world, which is how we all have to go forward from all of our challenges. Then you have a reason for what you're doing and you have a way forward. You don't fall into this just endless pit of despair. There were so many parts to this interview. I wonder which part you enjoyed listening to Mrs. Teichtel and her experiences as a mechanech, as a par excellence educator for so many years. I loved how she expressed as well the being pulled in so many ways, and how the Rebbe said, when you're doing something that is so positive to helping others, you don't have to worry about neglecting your family or your children, and how that was as well such a strong priority in her life throughout it all. If you enjoy watching these interviews, I hope you are subscribed to Chabad.org/extraordinary. You can find us as well on YouTube and on all podcast platforms. Tell us what you liked about this interview, about any of the interviews. We so appreciate your feedback, and we appreciate you being part of this extraordinary community.